Hey guys, it's Miss Clark. This is lesson 2 of When I Was Young in the Mountains, and this is for November 17th, 2020. And what we're going to do today is we're going to be talking about a couple of things from the story. So the first thing is our I can statement is I can describe the overall structure of a story. Move my little camera person up here. And then I can describe how the beginning introduces the story, how the action that takes place in the middle of the story, and how the ending concludes the action. Okay, so let's keep going. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the story again. And so when you're listening, I want you to be thinking about what does the beginning of the story do, what happens in the middle, and then what happens in the end. So think about the purpose of why they're there. Why is it important to discuss the beginning, middle, and end of the story? So let's get started.
Welcome to Briefy Story Time. Do you want to read this book with me? Don't forget to click the subscribe button for more. When I Was Young in the Mountains by Cynthia Ryland, illustrated by Diane Good. When I was young in the mountains, Grandfather came home in the evening, covered with the black dust of a coal mine. Only his lips were clean, and he used them to kiss the top of my head.
Okay, so it said that he came home from a coal mine. So a mine is a place where they would dig for gold and coal and different minerals to sell. And a lot of times they would work for a mining company, and the company would get a lot of the material that they got. Okay, so let's keep going.
When I was young in the mountains, Grandmother spread the table with hot cornbread, pinto beans, and fried okra. Later in the middle of the night, she walked through the grass with me to the Shawnee house and held my hand in the dark. I promised never to eat more than one serving of okra again.
Okay, so just as a review, a Johnny house is like an outhouse. It was basically like their bathroom back then. So as you probably learned yesterday, that about the setting and about when it took place. So there were three components to the setting. There's the place, and the time, and the environment. So it looks like this time period is maybe like the early 1900s, late 1800s time period. So they didn't have a lot of things that we do now.
When I was young in the mountains, we walked across the cow pasture and through the woods carrying our towels. The swimming hole was dark and muddy, and we sometimes saw snakes, but we jumped in anyway. On our way home, we stopped at Mr. Crawford's for a mound of white butter. Mr. Crawford and Mrs. Crawford looked alike and always smelled of sweet milk.
So it said a mound was like a little mound of white butter, so like a little pile of it on the plate.
When I was young in the mountains, we pumped pails of water from the well at the bottom of the hill and heated the water to fill round tin tubs for our baths. Afterward, we stood in front of the old black stove, shivering and giggling, while Grandmother heated cocoa on top. When I was young in the mountains, we went to church in the schoolhouse on Sundays, and sometimes walked with the congregation through the cow pasture to the dark swimming hole for baptisms. My cousin Peter was laid back into the water, and his white shirt stuck to him, and my grandmother cried. When I was young in the mountains, we listened to frogs sing at dusk and awoke to cowbells outside our windows. Sometimes a black snake came in the yard, and my grandmother would threaten it with a hoe. If it did not leave, she used the hoe to kill it. Four of us once draped a very long snake, dead of course, across our necks for a photograph. When I was young in the mountains, we sat on the porch swing in the evenings, and Grandfather sharpened my pencils with his pocket knife. Grandmother sometimes shelled beans and sometimes braided my hair. The dogs lay around us, and the stars sparkled in the sky. A bobwhite whistled in the forest. Bob, Bob, Bob White!
So it says that she shelled beans. So in the picture, you can see that she's pulling the pods off of the outside of the beans so that you can eat them. That's called shelling. It's like pulling the shell off. And then a bobwhite is like a little brown bird that would sing in the nighttime.
When I was young in the mountains, I never wanted to go to the ocean, and I never wanted to go to the desert. I never wanted to go anywhere else in the world, for I was in the mountains, and that was always enough.
All right. So there's the end of our story. Now, so I wanted you to think about the beginning, middle, and end of the story. So, after we've been reading it or listening, so we will talk about the beginning, middle, and end of the story. So you're going to talk about how the beginning introduces the characters and setting, how the middle shares the main events and problem, and how the end concludes the story. All right, so now, as you can see, we have our document right here. So here's our graphic organizer, and I want you guys to talk about or discuss at home and fill this out. The beginning of the story it tells about the character and setting. So I want you to write the character and setting, and then what happens in the beginning to introduce the story. So talk about what she talks about when she was young in the mountains, and then in the middle, tell about the problem. Well, there wasn't really a problem in the story. There were a couple of events that happened, like they had to kill a snake and things like that. And then write about what happens, and then at the end, you talk about the solution and the ending. And so you talk about what happens in the end to conclude the story. So, what I'd like for you guys to do now is go ahead and fill that out. And while you're doing that, here's some questions. So it says, how could changing the setting change the story? Okay, so kind of like a continuation of what we were talking about yesterday about the setting. So how could changing the setting change the story? And then why would a different setting cause the characters to have different experiences? Okay, so I want you to think about those as well as you're filling out your graphic organizer. So I hope you guys have a great day, and I hope you enjoyed this story because this is one of my favorites. It just makes you feel good inside, All right, well, I hope you guys again have a great day, and I will see you in my next video.